It's very difficult when you have been in isolation to get back into the everyday world again.
I know I'm not physically as fit as I was before lockdown. And I don't think I exercise as intensively as I did when I went to the gym. I'm aware of that. And I'm aware of that when I walk and I get out of breath. And also my balance isn't as great as it used to be. So I need to get back to doing some of those exercises. Social aspect of the gym, it's great because you get to know people and you don't have buddy conversations, but you chat and chew the rag with people. And the staff are so welcoming and make it a pleasant atmosphere in there. And as I said, you can have a coffee as well. So it's all good.
It went beyond just going to do exercises. It was the social side was so positive, and that would be lovely. That'd be lovely to get back to that again and see everyone again.
Hi guys, and welcome. So my name's Jane Knowles. I'm Chief Exec at Somerset Activity and Sports Partnership. So loneliness isn't just about older people, although many of us, including me at many times, equate it to this age range. But there are so many different factors that affect us through our life course on loneliness. And Tom, who's our speaker, is no doubt going to touch on some of that. So the research shows that at midlife, being too busy affects our socialising, and then that has a knock-on effect that actually we get used to being busy with children and family. And then as we get older, it shows that our health is actually the greatest barrier to meeting others and being social. So what can we do about that? What part can physical activity play in supporting the End Loneliness campaign in Somerset? And I hope this morning will give you sort of food for thought about how we use physical activity and the We Are Undefeatable. So the video we saw was our We Are Undefeatable ambassadors talking about their mental well-being and how they've managed it through physical activity. So I'm really excited and very, very grateful to Tom Burton, who's the National Partnerships Lead for Sport England around health and inactivity. Tom's led the We Are Undefeatable campaign, sort of investment and management into the Richmond Group charity from Sport England, and has been a great advocate and someone to work with for us about backboarding things, and he's been so open to learning new and different ways and suggesting new and sharing all those ideas about how we improve our population's health. So what I'd ask is that you put some questions in the chat as you go. If you have, we've only got Tom till 10:30. And I'm going to mute myself and hand on to Tom. So thanks, Tom.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane. What a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much. I don't often get them like that, so that's brilliant. Thank you. And I've really enjoyed working with Somerset, and obviously that's due to continue. So I'm just going to try and share my screen, and I'm going to look for some nods. Let me just come back because that's the thank you slide. We don't want that. Can I get Jane? Can you give me a nod, please? Thank you very much. Thumbs up. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay. So yeah. So as Jane said, my name's Tom. I work at Sport England, our health and inactivity team, and really I do a lot of the work I've been doing. I guess where a lot of the We're Undefeatable campaign has come from is around our work to try and tackle some of those real stubborn inequalities that we see around sport and physical activity, where some of those groups, individuals, and communities that just for many years it's just proven more challenging to get active or keep an active lifestyle for all sorts of reasons. And one of those groups has been people living with long-term health conditions. And I'm going to touch on, as I go through this presentation today, I'm going to touch on that a little bit through the lens of the We're Undefeatable campaign. But as James alluded to, that's included, that work is not, the We're Undefeatable campaign is one part of it, and it's absolutely a golden thread throughout a lot of this work, but it includes working with national health charities, the Richmond Group. It's around how do we work with healthcare professionals to ensure they feel motivated and confident to have the right physical activity type conversations and deliver effective brief advice at the right points for people. And of course, this is absolutely, we know loneliness is such a risk factor for so many things. which I'll touch on shortly, it's really important that those conversations happen and that they happen at the right times and they really work for that individual and support them ultimately to be active in a way that works for them. So, so I'm going to spend about 20 minutes or so just talking through some of the context, which I know many of you will be familiar with, so it'll be a refresher for some around what we mean by loneliness, what some of the national strategy and direction of travel is, not just at Sport England, but certainly across wider government, what some of the data is telling us through the Active Lives survey about loneliness, and then some of the approaches Sport England have taken to invest and work with partners to enable or to reduce feelings of loneliness across the board, but particularly amongst certain audiences as well. And then we'll have a little look to the future. So I hope that sounds okay. And we'll have some time for questions at the end. So this is going to be familiar for many of you, but what do we know about loneliness, and particularly when we talk about health and well-being? Well, I think it's an important part to say before we start reading through this, looking at the slide, all of us feel lonely from time to time. But what we know is that certain groups, certain individuals and communities are really disproportionately affected to an extent that it becomes really debilitating to our health. And it's at those points where there's some real challenges there where we need to intervene and identify and support those individuals in the right way. But it's important to recognise loneliness as subjective, but it's an unwelcome feeling, it's a lack or loss of companionship, and it's absolutely about that mismatch between the quantity and quality of some of our social relationships that we have and those that we want. And obviously when we have that mismatch is where it can often feel really challenging for people. But we also know actually it's one of our greatest public health challenges. And this is identified through the NHS and some of their long-term plan, through the work of Public Health England as well. When we look at, actually it's linked to a significant number of early deaths in people, to the extent where it's on a par with smoking or being obese, smoking up to 15 a day in terms of early deaths and mortality rates. It's linked to increased risk of coronary heart disease and stroke. And certainly, as we know, it's increased risk of number of mental ill health, mental well-being challenges, depression, cognitive decline, and Alzheimer's as well. And we know often where we want to be involved in social networks, social relationships, and we can't be, we often feel socially rejected. And it triggers a response in our brain physically that feels similar to experiencing physical pain. Now, often when we talk about loneliness, and I'll touch on isolation shortly, it comes under this banner of social well-being. And for those of you that remember back in, I think it was 2016 now, the government released the Sporting Futures document, which looked at sort of 5 key outcomes that we knew physical activity, sport and movement more generally could help address. And social well-being, social and community development were a big part of that. And this is about our personal relationships and social support networks and the way they can bring happiness, comfort and resilience and support our overall well-being. And when we think about this, there's this disparity between, and I guess the words isolation and loneliness are used quite interchangeably. And to some extent, I feel it's semantics. But also, I think it's important to say that loneliness generally is subjective. It's a subjective feeling that we get. And isolation is more of an objective piece. So you can be physically isolated if you live in rural areas, you have trouble accessing things, but people often feel isolated as well. So I think it's important to recognise actually, whichever way we look at it, it's a challenge that we all need to address. So back in 2018, following the Joe Cox Commission on Loneliness, and Joe Cox was a huge advocate on this piece of work, and it drove a huge amount across the government. There was a new strategy that was developed, and it was a connected society, so a strategy for tackling loneliness, laying the foundations for change. And within that, the government set out a very clear vision. And that vision is to be a place where we can all have strong social relationships and where families, friends and communities can support each other. Really importantly, especially at vulnerable points where people are at greater risk of loneliness, some of those life events and life changes that we see, where institutions value the human element in how we interact with people and where loneliness is recognised and acted on without stigma or shame, so that we can all look out for one another. And I think, most of us certainly want to be in a place where this all comes true. And I think alongside the publication of the strategy, really importantly, was where does accountability sit? Where across government does this sit then? It's a cross-government piece of work, but where does it sit? And that was where there was the first appointment for a Minister for Loneliness back in 2018. And there's been a couple of individuals that have taken that seat, but really importantly, someone that's driving this work cross-government. And the strategy lays out 3 core aims. And they are a commitment to play our part in improving the evidence base around better understanding loneliness, what causes it, what its impacts are, how to tackle it. And we know that physical activity can play a really important part in that, in recognizing how we can identify and support people at that point and the role that physical activity can play. It needs to be a consideration across government, recognizing the wide range of factors that can exacerbate those feelings of loneliness and support people's social well-being and resilience. And really importantly, and I think where today fits into this, is this national conversation to raise awareness and to help tackle stigma. And actually, I think it was as I was doing a bit of research for the purposes of today and actually looking through this strategy, I thought it's exactly these types of conversations and bring it to the attention and across the board, across different partners, different sectors, and having this type of conversation where we can really have some collective impact. So moving away, I guess, from some of the strategic national direction of the strategy there, and I should say there's a task force that underpins some of that work that Sport England contribute into on some of that task force to combat loneliness. And that's a lot of the learning we get that Jane was talking about will feed into that as well. So there will continue to be this learning loop that comes from national to local and local back to national as well. And that's a really important piece. But let's move on to some of the data. So this is the Active Lives survey. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but this is our national surveillance programme that we tend to get 2 data tranches a year. And this was the tranche that we got that covered the period November 19 to November 20. And the reason that's important, as you can appreciate, is because it takes into account pre-pandemic and the pandemic. So actually some of the later data, we're going to start to see some trends emerging, I suspect, as we start to analyse and dig a bit deeper. But through that Active Lives survey, we ask a very simple question: how often do you feel lonely? And it's a lot of people, it's interesting when you ask this as part of sport and physical activity survey, but this is because of the natural synergy there is around levels of activity, and which is I'm about to touch on. And of those people, 5%, so this is all adults, adult population 16 plus, it's statistically significant survey, so we can have a lot of confidence in it. 5% of the adult population feel lonely often or always. And actually, if you looked at that national strategy I mentioned earlier, they anticipate it's more likely to be 5 to 10%. So kind of depending which surveys you look at. When you start talking about numbers and bringing that to life, it's really significant. But it's not just the often or always, it's that 17% that sometimes feel lonely. So that's that's over a fifth of adults that at least sometimes feel lonely, often might feel or be isolated. But for the purposes, I guess, of the Active Lives survey, we started to delve a bit deeper into that 5%. Who are they and what do we know? And apologies, I'm hoping you can see this because I tried to make this a bit bigger as I was doing these slides. I'm hoping you can see it. I'll try and talk through it. So we know, what do we know? We know that people who engage in physical activity are less likely to feel lonely. And part of the way we know that, if you look at this chart on the left-hand side of the slide here, we know there's greater proportion of people who feel lonely if they're inactive. That's doing less than 30 minutes moderate intensity activity each week. And we know that obviously the more active you are, the less likely you're going to feel. But I think it's really important the nuance here is just because you're active, you can still feel lonely. And there's lots of examples of people that even though you're surrounded by people around you, you can still have a subjective sense of loneliness and feeling lonely. So just because you have people around you doesn't always mean you don't feel that way. And I think that is an important nuance. But generally speaking, the more inactive you are, the greater likelihood is you're going to feel loneliness. And I think what's really interesting here in the bottom left, it's a sort of a tiny caveat, is there is an association that holds, is irrespective of levels, activity levels. We know that if you have a disability or you live with a long-term health condition, you're equally likely to be lonely whether you're inactive or active. So this is a group where there are broader challenges at play here, which we're going to touch on a bit more. And a really interesting piece, I guess, when you start looking at loneliness levels across the pandemic, is generally speaking, there wasn't significant spikes or peaks or troughs in that. And I think possibly there will be variations within this, I have to say, but this is sort of a broad brushstroke. So it stayed in or around that sort of 4.5 to 5.5% feeling lonely often or always during the pandemic. But you would have seen that spike for different audiences. But obviously, as those latest restrictions came in towards the end of last year, people were feeling very uncertain and actually starting to feel a little bit lonely. And that's why I'm interested in the next tranche of data to sort of tell us actually how did that hold throughout the winter months and into spring this year. So again, digging that bit deeper, we're still looking here at the audience that is feeling lonely often or always. So we know, breaking that down, women are slightly more likely to report feeling lonely often or always compared to men. And when we look at age, and I think Jane actually touched on this and I think framed it really well, is this is an issue across the life course. This isn't something just as it happens as you get older, but as that chart down there shows you, in terms of this is just those that feel often or always, we see a significant spike in the 16 to 24 age range and a significant spike in the 85 plus age range. So I think it can affect everyone, is what we're saying, and I think that's how we need to view it. But we recognise there are groups, there are age ranges, there are sort of profiles, if you like, where people are possibly more likely to feel that way. And unsurprisingly, like we see across many of the inequalities when we unpick it, differences in socioeconomic groups have an impact here. So those communities, those individuals that might be in lower socioeconomic groups are more likely to feel and report higher feelings of being lonely. And as I touched on earlier, and I'll come on to this a little bit more, certainly people that self-report to have a disability or long-term health condition are more likely to have higher levels of reporting feeling lonely. And I think importantly, the nuance there is the more impairments you have, the more likely you're going to report feeling lonely. And this is something, as I'll touch on shortly, actually we're seeing more and more people living with complex needs and potentially, particularly with more than just one long-term health condition or one impairment linked to a disability. So staying on the pandemic then and the impact, because I don't think we can not consider the impact because the ripple effect is huge. But I know I'm delighted that we're joined by colleagues from Age UK, going to probably talk through a little bit later on, but some of the impact of COVID on older people's mental and physical health. And bearing in mind, this was reported later in 2020 as well, but I think will still hold for many. Many people, older adults, deeply afraid of COVID-19, even though the number of COVID cases were reducing over the summer. Significant proportion of older people stayed at home or close to home. And this is where I think it's really important, this second bit here, because this is where we see the ripple effect. So staying at home can lead to a number of serious problems. For example, the loss of function, mobility and balance. So we talk about deconditioning, this term deconditioning a lot. And actually that's a reduced ability to undertake the daily tasks that you may have been able to do pre-pandemic for all sorts of reasons, some physical, some confidence. But it's as a result of moving around less, it's being more sedentary. And there's also the pain from untreated medical conditions. So we see waiting lists going up as a result. We've all seen this in the media being reported. There's also people feeling much more reluctant to go and see their GP or going to access primary and secondary acute care services. We seeing this quite a lot, particularly for certain groups. And the psychological impact, of course, of living with so much stress, uncertainty, and that absolute isolation when you are actually unable to access services or networks, is that feeling of isolation that leads to increased loneliness amongst other problems. And I guess we know, I think we could have a pretty good guess that the more deconditioned the population are, the less confident or capable to reintegrate into community activities, the potentially the increased likelihood of reporting of feeling lonely. So talked about the We're Undefeatable campaign earlier on. Just to remind everyone, that is around supporting people, particularly living with long-term health conditions, to support people to be active in a way that works for them, whatever that looks like. And if you're not already a We're Undefeatable supporter, shameless plug coming up, but if you're not already a supporter, we really do encourage people to sign up, go onto the we'reundefeatable.co.uk website and link and become a supporter. So it says supporters hub. There's no, all you're really doing is signing up to be able to access all the assets and resources. There's nothing else there to potentially to access our newsletters if you want them. But there's loads of information actually that comes up all the time. This is an insight-based campaign. This is based upon the needs of people with health conditions. This is lots of quantitative, qualitative data, huge number of focus groups. We have a whole community of people living with a range of health conditions, range of severity of health conditions that are telling us what their experiences are about being active, what they'd like them to be. So we know, and I guess I'm probably preaching to the converted here, many people living with a long-term health condition, many people do live with a health condition and it's increasing. About a third of the adult population live with at least one health condition. The trend is by 2030, there'll be 40% of our adult population living with at least one, and the trend analysis is showing that people will be living with multiple long-term health conditions. So whilst previous research showed that the unpredictability of living with those health conditions can already make it hard to be active, although on a real positive note, pre-pandemic, we were seeing levels of inactivity reducing amongst this particular audience. We know that the data throughout COVID demonstrates this adds another set of barriers and challenges. And actually, we talk about loneliness. People with long-term health conditions are twice as likely to report feeling lonely, particularly during the pandemic, and report higher levels of worry and anxiety. We also did a piece of work around digital access and inclusion and exclusion. And we know that roughly 1 in 5 people with a health condition report themselves to feel digitally excluded. Now, that often might be physical access, or it might be confidence to access. And they're two slightly different things, and both need addressing, really. But we know so much has come from the pandemic in terms of innovative ways to keep people active. You know, we're likely to continue to see this trend, probably a digital trend particularly, continuing. And obviously, people living with long-term health conditions were, and some are, significantly more likely to shield, isolate, or feel, I guess, more concerned or worried about returning to activity, even with relaxing restrictions. And actually, we did a bit of a research dip recently, where we actually went out and spoke to the latest sort of feelings. And whilst there is a positive feeling amongst this particular group, that actually, particularly after having a second jab, they're more likely and feel able to go and access community activities. It's still the confidence levels are still significantly below people that don't have a health condition. So that's a little bit about the data, a little bit more about some of the impact that we're seeing. And I know colleagues speaking today will touch on some of this a bit more, but I thought it would be just interesting to talk through just a few of our approaches, Sport England's approaches to address some of this test and learn. When I say they're collaborative approaches. We work very closely with all of these partners, and obviously Age UK are here to talk a little bit more about their approach today. Our active aging portfolio across 22 programs across the country has done a lot around this, but I thought I'd just touch on a few. One of them is around carers. Carers are 7 times more likely to report feeling lonely than people who do not have caring responsibility. And there's all sorts of reasons for that. And actually, Carers UK, if you've not already seen it, you can go onto their website. They've got a brilliant insight pack on there, lots of information on there. And so part of the work that we're undertaking is to, Carers UK know this audience better, certainly better than anyone else. And so actually the work is, how can we embed and integrate physical activity into those conversations, into the support, into the messaging that goes out. Actually, how can Carers UK play a role to influence and advocate to wider sectors, or to support the sport and physical activity sector to continue to better understand this audience? There are lots of health inequalities when it comes to people who are in receipt of care or are a carer as well. So that's an example, I guess, of some of the strategic relationship, an example of a strategic relationship where we're actually looking to, how can we ensure physical activity can play a real critical role for people. English Football League Trust, using football through their extra time hubs, one of their programme, to engage semi-retired and retired people, particularly men, but men and women, to sort of get involved in group-based activity, particularly to share some experiences through the pandemic as well, and how people are feeling. And there's a real openness there, and to tackle stigma around feelings of mental health and if people are feeling lonely. And I think anecdotally, it's one of the things we all pick up on when you hear people, and there's a really fantastic movement and momentum around mental health and people feeling more able to speak up, speak to someone else. There's been lots around it in the media, really, really fantastic to keep that going. But we know actually when you listen to people talk about it, loneliness is often at the heart of a lot of how people are feeling. So I think it's really important that we use that and make sure people do recognise actually the value in talking to others and provide the conditions where people feel able to do that. Ramblers, many will be familiar, they run led walks across the country, the Walking for Health programme. They've also done some specific work identifying with local primary care services in certain patches where some people are at risk of loneliness or have reported being lonely to a GP, and how we can get them onto led group walk programmes. British Red Cross, we're actually going to get some learning from the British Red Cross next month. in August, which we'll be able to share with all of you. I think with some, and I'm going to share some high-level findings, emerging findings shortly. But they've been working with the co-op for the last 6 to 7 years around community connectors and trying to reduce loneliness by connecting people reintegrated with a buddy, but also back into the community. And we look to work with them across a number of different sites around, well, where could physical activity play a part in that? And then the final thing there, and I know there's a lot of momentum nationally around social prescribing, but we've developed a strategic relationship with the National Academy for Social Prescribing, where I'm sure everyone's familiar, but the purpose being that individuals who might be experiencing a range of challenges can access support through a link worker, but they can have an in-depth conversation with someone who can really understand their needs and can make a non-medical referral into community or other services that they can really benefit from. And physical activity absolutely is fundamental to that. So this is happening across the country. There's lots of NHS momentum behind this. And actually, I presented on the NASP webinar yesterday around exactly this, around how it fits into Sport England objectives and physical activity work across the country. But absolutely, we want to make sure that continues to play a really important part. And people often, a risk factor for a lot of things around loneliness, when they're having conversations with link workers, we want to make sure that physical activity is almost the forefront of their mind, if it works with that individual, about how they might be able to address some of those individual challenges as well. I mentioned the British Red Cross. We'll be able to share with you, I'd be delighted to share some of those findings from the Red Cross when they come out next month. But this isn't rocket science, some of the high level stuff that's coming out of here, but I think reinforces possibly what we already know, which is also really valuable. That building trust is really, really important part of the process to support people who are feeling lonely. This can take time and helps form quality relationships. Probably that trust piece goes for anyone really, but I think particularly so for this audience. We've talked about reducing stigma and being able to talk about it. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. There's not one program that can tackle this, and it must be tailored to those individual needs, which could be a one-to-one, it could be a group-based activity, but I think importantly, physical activity needs to be able to integrate into some of those wider services and either be a pathway or a discussion wherever that individual is. I'm delighted Befriending's come up, because I think that's something we're going to be talking about. It's a seamless link into one of the talks coming up shortly. Is a proven approach that works for many. And we know that obviously the importance of advice and signposting and I've underlined this because I think this is really important, local, welcoming and supportive activities. And of course, group-based provision is really important, but some people want to be active in different ways. But that welcoming and supportive piece is obviously really important. It's happening all up and down the country, but I know there's continuing to be a lot more discussion around what does it really mean to be welcoming and what does it really mean to be supportive. I think it's a really good conversation to have, where you go along to an activity and you want to learn the technical aspects of that activity, absolutely, but actually how you feel, the social networks you develop, how you're supported, I think is really, really important, and how inclusive it is, of course. So, and I know I'm hoping I'm doing all right. Am I doing all right for time, Jane? You know what I'm like. Am I okay?
You've probably got 5 minutes at most.
Perfect. So, uniting the movement, our new strategy, Sport England strategy, but it's a physical activity sector and sports sector strategy. 18 months of consultation around it, range of different partners have fed into it, and two important things to recognise with this. It was launched early this year. It's a 10-year strategy. First time we've had a 10-year strategy that has the longevity to be able to, and recognises the time it takes to do all the things we want to do, to build those relationships and have that vision. And secondly, that tackling inequalities is absolutely at the heart of this piece of work. It's not just about inequalities in sport and physical activity participation, it's the role sport and physical activity can also play in tackling some of those wider societal inequalities that we see. So I just want to touch on really quickly while I've got time. 5 areas came out really strongly in the strategy that all of our partners said the strategy needs to step up on over the next 10 years. I'll talk through them very briefly, but I think you start to see where loneliness is a common thread throughout all of this and needs to be addressed. Recover and reinvent, unsurprisingly, is around how we respond to the needs now and the ripple effects of the pandemic on individuals that might feel less able, confident to be active, but also the sectors to support them. Active environments is around the places and spaces that we live and work, open spaces, parks and open spaces, designed urban environments. How can we support active travel, for instance, facilities? Connecting communities is all about positioning people and the communities they live in at the heart of our work and our thinking, so that actually we have offers that respond to the needs of that community, because there's so much difference from place to place. And obviously how we drive a lot of this work through a place, and the role of active partnerships will be integral to that. Positive experiences for children and young people. We know how our adult relationship with being active is so much shaped by our relationships, our experiences as a young person or as a child or an adolescent. And actually we want to get them, continue to try and get that right through school and out of school. And then an area finally where I guess I'm having a lot more focus on, connecting with health and well-being, which is really about, and as I talked about, inclusive and accessible opportunities, particularly as we get older or live with health conditions. It is about integrating into health and social care systems, and having a one system approach to keep people healthy for longer, and physical activity being key to that, as well as supporting people when they become less well or ill, or live with health conditions or whatever it might be. And it's also about working with trusted organisations that can have that with this common and shared purpose around improving health and well-being, and using physical activity to do that. So through all of those, you can start to see, and we're working on the first iteration of an action plan, if you like, for that, which will be published in December, and we'll be working with partners to develop that. But of course, loneliness is going to be one of those key sort of areas of interest that's going to be a golden thread throughout a lot of this work. Thank you for allowing me to waffle at you for 20 minutes or 25 minutes, whatever it's been. I'm happy to take any questions. Jane, I'm okay for another sort of 10 minutes or so.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And thank you, Tom. That's it's been, I've worked with Sport England for more years than I want to say. And over the last probably 5 years, we've moved into physical activity and health and that more holistic look at people, and it's been a absolute love working with Tom. It's been a meeting of minds and been such good fun as we challenge each other through the thing. So we do have a number of questions.
Okay.
I think Leanne's got questions, but we'll just start on the first one, which was around gender differences and loneliness, and whether we know too much about that at the moment.
Oh, I mean, it would be a question to send back to our team. I don't know enough about it. I mean, that's as deep dive as I think as I've been able to access. But I suspect there is. I think there's a difference between being careful between seeing what the data is actually telling us, and then and trying to interpret that. And so I think that part of that will be working with our partners to try and unpick some of that, and what we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're learning across the country to do that. But I haven't got an answer for you right now, I'm afraid. It'll be something we need to go away and look at.
Okay, thank you. Leanne, are there other questions?
Yeah, so there's a question from Steve, which was around any thoughts on why the 16 to 24-year-old range is the highest?
That was one actually I queried myself. I think a lot of it came down to, because if you think about the time of year and through the pandemic, I think suddenly you had a group of people that either weren't accessing work, weren't accessing further or higher education. And I think probably the impact on there was felt more greatly because more proportion of your time is spent with other people in those type of institutions or through work, and suddenly it's not. So I think, you know, that's where it's pointing to at the moment in terms of the pandemic's impact. But I think it's really important to say also, when we've done some mental health based scoping work before, when we've looked at who are those most affected, often children and young people's mental health, particularly in girls, are some of the highest levels of poor mental well-being that we're seeing in that age range. And so that could also be telling us a story around that it's not just the pandemic, there's broader challenges at play there as well.
Excellent, thank you. There was just a couple of sort of comments really from people. Julie Robinson said about, you know, linking up with sort of intergenerational projects. So thinking about the younger age groups with the older age groups, if they're the most disproportionately affected by loneliness. And then someone mentioned about, yeah, my daughter's school hooks up the local care home, which is a great example of some lovely intergenerational work. So yeah, some really nice sort of feedback and comments there around that aspect. Has anyone got any other questions they want to raise at this point, or are we happy? Anyone else last?
I suppose I just wanted to say, so it's Jane here, I just wanted to say that the Build Back Fairer, I think, is something that we really need to think about, given that we have a chance and an opportunity after the pandemic for people to think differently. We have thought a lot more, you know, the slide that Tom showed around our socioeconomic groups, that the lower the socioeconomic group, the more lonely you're likely to be, the more likely you are to have long-term health conditions. Actually, this is our chance, and this local conversation about how do we all collaborate to make sure that actually people access services, so we have no wrong door, because loneliness is a serious issue and actually affects every part of people's lives through that. And I do think the physical activity has a part to play. So Tom, I just want to thank you very, very much for your contribution. I know it was, I know you had to move things around to be here today.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm really, really grateful, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we were going to do some Slido, but we're a little bit short of time. So we're going to move straight on to our next speakers, which Caroline Adije, who is from Milton Keynes, Age UK, and is one of the projects that Sport England funded around befriending walks. They have done a magnificent job. And off the back of that, the Age UK in Somerset have modelled some work there. So Phil Dolan, who's the Chief Exec of Age UK Somerset, is going to come on after Caroline and say where we are, because we're at the beginning stages. So Caroline's going to give you the overview. So I'm going to hand on to Caroline, who's the grants officer at Milton Keynes Age UK. I hope she's there somewhere. Hi, Caroline.
Hi, I'm here. I've just had a message to say that our internet connection is unstable, so hopefully this is okay.
It looks fine for me.
Okay. Is it okay to share screen, or did you want to?
That would be, would you like to share screen? Is that easier for you?
That might be easier.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Okay, I hope everyone can hear me. So my name is Caroline Adije. Like Jane said, I'm the grants officer here at Age UK Milton Keynes. And I'm just going to walk you through what we've kind of been doing with our project, just so you get a bit of an idea. So just to start, at Age UK Milton Keynes, we obviously work with and for older people in the Milton Keynes borough. Our aim is to improve their well-being and quality of life. So all of our services and activities are kind of set up to do that. We are one of 130 Age UKs, referred to as local brand partners. So we form quite a wide network that covers the whole of the country, but each Age UK is separate and independent. So the services and activities that they set up in their local area are a direct response to what's needed in their local area. So there are some shared services, but generally you'll find that lots of different Age UKs do different things, basically. So just to take you back to the start of this project, I think it was in about 2017 when we kind of responded to Sport England's Active Ageing programme, call out for applications. The projects were looking for things that tackled inactivity in older people, and Sport England, I suppose, were looking for different methods. There was no uniform process. There was no typical type of thing they were looking for. They just wanted a wide breadth of ideas, basically anything that would help kind of tackle inactivity in older people. So we kind of looked at our services and we thought, who is in need of increasing physical activity? And we kind of looked at our befriending service for a number of reasons, but primarily because it was a service that we've kind of always been running here since the start of the charity in about like 1978. There's always been some form of befriending. So the model was kind of established, it was set in stone, and it hadn't really been changed or altered much in the years previous. So we thought that perhaps looking at the clients that are within the service could kind of help us reach out to older people who are probably, in terms of the breadth of our services, probably some of the most lonely and isolated. The befriending model is on a one-to-one basis, so it does favour people who don't like group activities or feel a bit more comfortable being in a one-to-one environment, but still identify that they need social contact, and they might have lost contacts over the years and lost friendship circles, so they are at a heightened risk of being lonely and isolated. All befriending visits kind of take place in the person's home. Customarily, it's a 1 hour visit, it's a chat to see if people are well, just kind of talk about things, and it's just kind of providing companionship for people. And it also tended to favour the oldest old, so people in their 80s and 90s. So that's why we were thinking that it'd be quite an interesting idea to tackle or to combat loneliness and inactivity in this cohort of people. And we didn't think it was going to be easy at all, but we knew that the type of befriending clients we had had in the past, when we talked to them about things that they would like to do, walking was one of the things that they talked about a lot, but they just didn't have the opportunities or anybody really to go with. So we kind of looked at, kind of engaging with this cohort of people. And in addition to being lonely and isolated, we recognised that a lot of the befriending clients had and experienced a life event. So they'd either suffered a bereavement, they were separated from their family, whether geographically or just because of breakdown in family relationships, but there was some reason why that a significant life event had kind of affected the way that they, their moods, the way they saw life, their enjoyment of enjoying later life, basically. So that was the typical kind of client. So as I've said, the significant life events we chose to focus on was kind of bereavement. A high proportion, a high percentage of our clients had been bereaved within the last 5 to 10 years. And in talks and in communication with them, they kind of said that that had an impact and had kind of provided some kind of barrier to them engaging with the local community and perhaps doing things that they once enjoyed or once used to do with a partner. So when we came up with the idea, we thought in order to do this, we had to start small. So the idea initially was to provide short walks in the local area, very immediate to the client's home, so that they could be familiar with their surroundings. We're not asking them to, climb mountains or go up massive hills or anything, but it's almost like a slightly controlled environment, very close to their homes, regular walks with a trained befriender. So we knew that there was a broad range of clients coming to us, but the idea was to get them moving more regularly and kind of taking enjoyment from that. Perhaps it's a hidden way of getting people to do a bit of exercise and activity, because you're walking and talking with somebody, you might not necessarily feel that you're, putting in a gym workout or rambling or doing really long, intense walks or something. But the idea of getting people who don't leave their house very often or for very limited reasons, doing something that's enjoyable with companionship to kind of help improve their confidence, to help them engage with local points of interest. And for some of our clients, they had a fear of their local area, perhaps perception of safety meant that they really didn't want to walk by themselves, but didn't feel able to join perhaps some of the group health walks that happen in and around Milton Keynes. So we knew that this could perhaps be a bridge for some people who were keen to do more activity as well. So the project we did ran for 2 years. the funding was for 2 years, and we supported around 76 clients. The split between male and female was 70 to 30, which is in line with kind of the traditional befriending service. Although at the beginning we did see more of interest from male clients as well, which is something that we're always quite conscious of, because we feel that sometimes some of our services we get more female volunteers, we have more female clients who express the need for befriending services. So it was quite key for us to continue to support the male clients. We had a broad range of ages. The youngest client was 58 and the oldest being 96 years old. So that was really positive, because that was not typical for the befriending service. So we had kind of dropped the age boundary, and we were taking in a younger, older person. So people who had in previous years been more physically active, but because of health reasons, because of barriers, because of circumstance, it had kind of slipped out of that. So they had the willingness to do activity and the desire was there, but it was just getting their confidence levels back up again. 75% of the clients had at least one long-term health condition. So we had people who had Parkinson's, dementia, people who had things like COPD and heart conditions, people who were managing their health through medication, but were obviously physically able, and had been cleared to do to increase the activity levels. So we've had quite a broad range of people in that respect, and that was something that had perhaps we hadn't been really aware of. We were focused on tackling the lonely, isolated people who had bereavement, significant life events. So this was something that we had to realize early on and kind of include in our training, include in our managing the situations. And our walking ranges happened between 20 minutes to 2.5 hours. It really was a very broad spectrum. I think we were surprised the desire for people to walk longer very quickly. And it was only because of the support of the befriender, giving them that kind of support, that kind of encouragement throughout the way. And the volunteer is very key in this relationship. This is an example, this picture here is an example of a befriender and her client, and they do specifically local walks. Frankie has a walker and she doesn't like to go too far. So their pattern is to go in the immediate neighborhood. And even though they visit each other for one main visit, they live quite close together. So Margaret does pop in and see Frankie and will take her on more frequent walks that might be of a shorter length during the week. But that in a nutshell is what it's about. It's about establishing relationship, a companionship, a friendship, someone that you can recognize and, you know, link with in the local area that will help you to do more activity. So yes, like I said, that we started quite small. We wanted the volunteers to kind of take ownership of it. The volunteers planned their routes. They kind of looked into little methods that could help their clients do a little bit more. So some were very good at setting targets. It could be targets of distance or targets of walking for a certain length of time, and then they would be slowly increased over time. Some people took that approach and it helped the volunteers perhaps plan in advance what they were going to do and where they were going to go. But we always emphasize, please start small and start local, just so that you can familiarize yourself with your client, how they behave, what they respond well to. Because the key to this is the relationship between the befriender and the client, and having an understanding with each other, we know has long-term benefits. So we always encourage them to do it in that way. We also did surveys and befriending journals to kind of help us monitor what was happening. We took baseline and then did 3, 6 and 12-month surveys using the Sport England's active lives to monitor how much physical activity they were doing. We did a loneliness scale as well to kind of identify their loneliness throughout the project. And then we did the WEMWebs to kind of capture the general well-being impacts of the service. The befriending journals were really good because they kind of helped us to hear and see what was happening on the walks particularly. So we would ask volunteers to feed back to us after every walk. For some people, they took a little bit longer and might do it every month and collate all their walks and what was happening within that period of time. And it was just good because you see and you're able to track the process going along, and you can see things that are coming up that are problems. It might be barriers that are nothing to do with physical activity, but somebody's concerned about something, and then they tell their volunteer, then their volunteer in turn can escalate the problem to us, or kind of come to us, and we can help them find solutions to those problems. So it prevents issues from becoming problems in the long run. And also really, really key to this is the whole matching process. So we've got a really great coordinator, Sam. She's very active and very in tune with the clients and the volunteers' needs. And she spends a lot of time matching people up, correctly matching them up. We often do via location, we do it via people's interests, but we found that this project has been a great way for us to involve volunteers who perhaps wouldn't take a volunteering role as a befriender. We've had a younger age profile of volunteer. We've had people who are working full time, but are able to fit in weekend walks or early evening walks in the summer, etc. So it's been really interesting. I think as a volunteer, I always think it must be quite difficult to be placed with an older person. It takes a bit of time to kind of build up a relationship. But by simply having the walk, it's quite an attractive prospect. I think it gives you something to talk about on your walks. You're walking, you're looking at nature, you're looking at local points of interest and history that sparked up. And it's just a great conversation starter to be able to be outside of the house environment. You know, by all means, you can come back in and have your social chat and a cup of tea once you get back inside. But because the emphasis is on being outside, we know that that's really supported some of our newer volunteers to kind of gain an understanding of what the service really is and what the impacts are. This is another picture of a couple of client and a volunteer. This client has dementia and she likes to fly kites on her walks. So they always schedule their walks in some of our local parks, just so that she has the opportunity to do this. And I think that's really key, understanding and knowing who you are visiting and who that person is you're supporting, because we meet people at the point of their need. We don't enforce a set route or a set plan on them, but we kind of gauge what the person wants and work with them. Yeah, so some of our experiences, I think for this project, we found that setting up referral pathways and partners very early on was quite key, because this is a project that you get clients signing up at separate time, you get volunteers signing up at separate time. So you need to be constantly promoting the service, promoting your service to within your own services. Like for us, we've got quite a number of services. So we went to our hospital aftercare service, our social prescribing projects, and encouraged them to refer appropriate clients in. But also it was important for us to have links with the community as well. So bereavement services, the local hospice, adult social care, even some of the health walks were really good to link up with, because they had a lot of retired people who were walk leaders already, came with training, came with an understanding of the local environment. So they were particularly quite good volunteers to have, because they came with an understanding of what we were trying to achieve. And it's a slightly different prospect from something that they would be doing within the wider health network walks. We also found that, you know, quite a lot of clients were fair weather walkers. They like to walk between, you know, March and October. March to October was the peak time for signing up and for people being very active with their walks. We did have people who were quite happy to walk, you know, in not so great weather and during the winter, but they were for people who were definitely more confident, and they were the types of people to take the longer walks and everything. But weather definitely was a factor. Where possible, we've got quite a large indoor shopping centre here. It's like nearly a mile long. So we would encourage people that wanted to still get their walks in to perhaps change the venue and do some of these protected walks that happened in the shopping centre. But generally people were quite happy to adapt their plans. If it suddenly started to snow or if it was rainy and it really wasn't great, there's enough flexibility to cancel a walk and then pick it up later in the week. And also we were able to take people to different parts of the cities. We found that the lakes, the linear parks, the canals and the river walkways were great places for people to go, because a lot of these people haven't really been leaving their house, but they wanted to connect with the community and they wanted to go to places that they remembered and to find that kind of enjoyment of being in the area again. And then also our walks were kind of split into different types. Some people had a purpose walk, so they would like to go for a walk to the local shop, to post a letter, etc. Some people were looking to build their walks and to do little challenges that would keep them involved and excited. But then for some people, it would be quite a long walk with a break in the middle, which could also be quite long, perhaps where they would go to a restaurant, to a pub garden, you know, have lunch, and then they resume this last part of the walk on the way home. So it worked differently for different people. These are another couple of our walkers out by Willen Lake. They were perhaps some of the strongest walkers. They would go on the longest walk and they continue to go on, you know, 2.5, 3 hour walks every week, which is fantastic. And to see where they started to where they are now, it's just really fantastic for the project. Then just also quickly, lockdown obviously had a massive impact. When we had to stop for the initial lockdown 12-week period, obviously we deal with people that are over 70, so they were all deemed to be either clinically vulnerable or people that needed to shield. So it kind of stopped the service. What we did in that time was we kept the relationships going via telephone contact, telephone befriending, and doorstep visits where appropriate. When we were allowed to go into people's gardens, we were able to resume the befriending side of things by making sure that we kept those relationships strong. When the easing of the guidelines came out, the majority of people were a bit hesitant. We did have some keen walkers who were able to get back out again, but there definitely was some fear and some hesitation. If pre-vaccine and talk of vaccine, there was some hesitation, perhaps for some of the people who had been at the lower end of the scale, who needed more encouragement in the beginning. But through keeping in contact, through staying perhaps very local and just encouraging people to get outside in their local area, we were able to build back up to where we were. Lockdown, the third lockdown, was really long and it had a massive impact on people's mental health. And people that had, you know, picked up momentum and were moving in a certain direction, it kind of affected them. It felt the winter lockdown was a very long one. But we also saw an absolute increase in the number of referrals to walking befriending services. I think by the second or third month in, we had something like 57 referrals alone for the service. So it was signing people up as best as we could and linking them together in pairs, but just kind of waiting for things to kind of lift back up again. And certainly the vaccine rollout has helped increase people's confidence locally. So what we've done since the official end of the project, we've kind of brought it within our overall befriending service. So the service runs within befriending. So there's one coordinator, one point of contact. Volunteers are trained and we've got the training materials to take in new volunteers as well. So it just enables us to keep the service going smoothly. And that was always our aim, to kind of embed it within what we're doing, because we're trying to change the culture of perhaps what befriending is, and know that it's not just sitting in your house and being inactive, but there are opportunities to engage with the local community. And it's a fantastic way to do so with the support of a befriender. We continue to engage with all the local services, as the health walks have been a little bit in Milton Keynes, a little bit slow to resume, but we're keeping in contact with definitely the sport and physical activity groups that are active, and using this opportunity to kind of using this downtime it's been to kind of make new opportunities and links with new people. We're in the process of just tailing off of our evaluation, preparing a toolkit as well. And we've also got like some frequently asked questions and a little video that we've got on our website to kind of support the learning that we've gathered so far. So I think I've just rambled on and I've got to the end of the presentation. But thank you for listening. There's the link to our website that's got all of the information about the programme on, and my contact details if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for sharing that with us today. Even though I've seen and heard this presentation a couple of times, I'm always so energised by the learning and the insights, and some of those images and stories I think really just help to bring it all to life, don't they? And have really inspired us locally in Somerset to achieve something as similar as possible, which I guess leads me quite nicely on to Phil, who is the CEO for Age UK Somerset, who's just going to share what we have managed to achieve locally in Somerset through a befriending, an active befriending walk and talk project. So I'm just going to see if Phil's ready to share what we've been doing locally.
Great, thanks, Leanne. Great presentation, Caroline. I love the idea that we can interrupt our walks by all having pub lunches. I think that's a great idea, and that's probably the learning I'll take from today. So this really is very quickly, because I know time's slipping away. This is about saying what's the offer in Somerset, and in partnership with Public Health and with SAS, we are now at Age UK Somerset introducing what we call Walk and Talk, because we love a little title for things because it makes it so much better, which is basically much of what Caroline said. It's going to start off, and it has started off, in the Bridgewater area. Volunteer comes to the home of a client and they link arms together and maybe start the walk around their garden, or maybe their street, or maybe their village, or maybe their estate. It really doesn't matter, but it's this whole idea of being able, as Caroline said, to be able to walk and talk, to cater for mental health, loneliness, because we know the segue from loneliness into mental health issues, and the physical activity. And I think it's also fair to say that, Age UK Somerset, like a lot of your organisations, is a trusted organisation. It's building on the fact that the befriending model is a well-known model, and it's a proven approach. And the point from the British Red Cross survey that Tom brought out, that one-to-one is a really important way of helping people take that next step on the road to physical activity, etc. So all of those things coalesce in this model. Now, of course, in fairness to Age UK staff, I do need to say that we offer lots of services, and we do cater for people's physical health. 130 classes we run every week. I'm grateful for the staff who do a fantastic job. We've had a traditional befriending service looking at loneliness and mental health. But in fairness, and being totally honest, if mental health and physical health actually came together in any one service, then it was accidental. We all know the story of, if I go to a Zumba class, there's a mental image to conjure with. On a Monday morning up at my village hall, it may not actually be about the exercise. It may actually be about the natter and the laughter and the coffee mornings that I arranged the next week with some of the attendees. So we've always known that's happened, but this is really a service that's now pulling that together. It's about combating loneliness, and it's about the physical activity as well. So very briefly then, it's a free service, as you would imagine, starting off from Bridgewater, but we're looking very soon to spread that across the whole of Somerset. We'll take referrals from social prescribers, from individuals, from families. It really doesn't matter. It's about the volunteer being trained, health and safety, trained in terms of being welcoming, being supportive, helping the individual feel very much at home. So in terms of where do we go with it? Well, obviously we want to segue people from that little walk around the garden, maybe to a longer walk. And wouldn't it be fantastic if they maybe joined one of SAS's walking tours, or maybe they joined an Age UK Somerset regular weekly exercise class. But even if that doesn't happen, the idea that they'll just on a daily basis do a little bit more physical activity than they've ever done before, that would be a great outcome. And in terms of the future, well, clearly we want to extend it much further than it is in Bridgewater to the whole of Somerset, and look for it to be funded. How is it going to be funded? Why would it be funded, you probably ask? Well, volunteers do travel. and travel does cost petrol. And that's predominantly where the funding goes, plus a little bit of admin back in the office to do the matching and to make sure the whole thing works well. I'm going to shut up now, and hopefully we've recovered some of the time. Back to you, Leanne.
Thank you, Phil. I think it's nice to give that sort of local input, isn't it, and to see what we're managing to create locally in Bridgewater as a pilot initially, but we will be expanding out. I know there's some comments in the chat about lots of excitement really around how people can get involved and what the next steps are and whether it costs anything and all those sorts of questions. And I just want to say a very quick thank you to both Phil and Caroline for sharing that around Befriending walks today. It's such a fantastic project, and now really want to hear from you as you know, our audience today and to the organisations that you work for, and we're going to set up a bit of a Slido to capture which organisations locally in Somerset would be interested in referring their patients or service users to an active befriending service, Walk and a Talk, or perhaps even volunteers as well, people that you know that you're working with or that are in your local community that may be able to support the Walk and Talk concept with Age UK and SAS. So I'm just going to hand over to Sarah, because I think there's perhaps some technical advice here needed, Sarah, around the Slido.
Brilliant, thank you. So Slido is just coming a little bit later. We're just going to do a quick poll now. So hopefully on your screens, you should see a poll that will come up. So yeah, if you can just fill in kind of how you're feeling right now, and we'll collect all of that, and then we can be in touch in the future. But yeah, just a very quick poll on Zoom for the time being.
Apologies, Sarah. I did realise it was a poll.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Slidos, polls and Slidos.
So I can just see, this is very clever, I can see the percentage of people that are voting. So nearly there we're on 73% of you. So if you do feel comfortable answering, that would be great. So we'll just give you just a bit more time to answer. Okay, so the bar isn't moving anymore, so we'll leave it there. So thank you, everyone.
Excellent, thank you. And what we'll do is we'll collate that information and make sure that when the pilot does expand across Somerset, that we make sure we get in contact and let you know about how you can get involved, which we hope will bring you lots of enthusiasm and energy. So moving on to our next agenda item now, we're looking at the Get Outside campaign. It's newly launched this week, and Sarah, who you just heard from there, who was running the poll, has been involved in heading up the campaign for SAS, but it is a collaboration across Somerset with other providers as well. So without further ado, I'd like to hand back over to Sarah to share with us Getting Outside.
Brilliant, thank you. So this campaign, it launched this week. It's been funded by Public Health at Somerset County Council. We're working in partnership with Spark Somerset, the Community Council for Somerset, so CCS, and also Somerset Wildlife Trust. And it's all about supporting and empowering people to get outside and just to move more in ways that suit them. So really trying to build up confidence after the pandemic that we've had. So yeah, just trying to support and empower people to get back out and get that fresh air, get moving more, but very on a local basis. So we're providing lots of opportunities through the new website that's been launched for people to find activities on their doorstep. And so yes, around the marketing of it all, so it's the campaign to encourage people, and so it'd be really great to hear from organisations if you do want to get involved. And we will have some funding to support partners with the promotion of the campaign. So yeah, so I will now just launch the video. So all the details are on social media, so please go and follow the Get Outside in Somerset social media tags. Have a look at the website, and please share the video amongst your customers, clients, partners. That would be great.
We've spent a long time inside.
But now it's time to get outside, doing the things we love.
Moving in any way we can.
For our minds and our bodies.
Exploring Somerset.
From its concrete pavements in bustling towns.
To its muddy lanes and rolling fields.
Somerset is waiting for you with open arms.
From Minehead to Muchelney.
Babkerry to Bridgewater.
Wells to Wellington.
And Cheddar to Chard.
It's time to open up our doors.
Spend time in our gardens.
Lace up our trainers.
Jump in the saddle.
And enjoy walks in the fresh air.
There is no right or wrong way to enjoy the outdoors and move more.
Finding peace in the wetlands.
Cycling through the levels.
Powering through the parks.
Taking joy in our towns.
And gathering with friends.
This is our beautiful county.
Our peace of mind.
Our mental health.
Our wellness.
Our Somerset.
And we are going to get outdoors. We've spent a long time in.
Okay. So that's the Get Outside in Somerset campaign. It's for all ages, so we are targeting the whole of Somerset across the population. So yeah, if you would like to get in touch of how to get involved, that would be really, really great. But please do promote. And again, working with all of you guys, we're all trying to do the same thing. So it's really about building that confidence now, and especially on that loneliness agenda. Over to you, Leanne.
Leanne's just frozen for a bit, so you're back to Jane, unfortunately. The joys of technology. So because we are SASP and this is all about physical activity a little bit, we now have the fabulous Jack Goodacre, who's one of our social prescribers, who's going to spend 5 minutes so that actually we all get moving, because it is very poor for us all to sit down for too long, and we recommend not sitting down for more than an hour. So Jack, can I introduce Jack Goodacre?
Good morning, everyone. Okay, good morning, everyone. We're going to start with just some basic mobility and then a bit of silly fun, because everybody loves a little bit of silly fun. So hopefully you'll be able to hear my music. I've just got a speaker here, so I'll just get that set up. But the first part, you can either do standing up or sitting down in a chair. I'll do most of it standing up, but most of it I will show you the bits that you can do that will be slightly different if you're sitting in a chair. So I'm just going to get some tunes on. It's cheesy, it's a bit of Elton John, so I hope you all like that. So hopefully you can hear a little bit of that. So I'm going to start standing up, guys, and we're going to start with hands out in front and then bringing your head down, and you should get a nice stretch across the top of the back. Really push your hands away and hold that stretch. This is a great one if you're sitting at a desk for a lot of the day, to stretch off that upper back. And then we're going to take the hands up to the top, so you're just going to hold those up there just for a few seconds, and then bringing the hands behind, and if you can, shuffle forward in your chair and then just lift up your hands as high as you can, get a nice stretch across the chest. Okay, then we're going to go for these muscles in the top here. So I'm going to get my right wrist, I'm going to grab it behind my back, and I'm going to pull it down and across. Whilst I'm doing that, I'm going to tilt my head off to the left. So I'm pulling my right wrist to the left, I'm tilting my head to the left. So I'm getting a nice stretch across and down the neck. And then we're going to do the other side. So I'm taking my left wrist in my right hand, I'm pulling it down across. I'm going to tilt my head that same direction. So just a nice little bit of stretch across the upper body. Then we're going to put forearms together, fingers interlinked, and we're going to roll the wrists around, so wrist circles. We're going to go in one direction. And then we're going to take it in the other direction. And then, guys, we're going to put hands out in front, and we're going to take one arm out to the side, bring it back to the middle. Try not to hit anybody in the face if you're working in an office at the moment. So we're just alternating the arms out to the side, back to the middle. Then we're just going to bring the hands in a little bit, and we're just going to do some torso rotation. So keep trying to look forwards and hips staying forwards, but we're just going to turn the torso a little bit. So just getting some movement through the spine. You should feel, might get the odd little crunch. Don't mind a little bit of a pop or a crunch. Just your bones doing their thing. And then everyone, we're going to pop fingertips on or as near to your shoulders as you can. And we're going to roll the elbows forward. So a bit of mobility through the shoulders. Everybody's looking good. And then backwards. And then just to get your brain going, we're going to go one backwards and one forward. This way we all start looking like we're swimming. And then the other way. Okay, give that a little shake out, guys. And then we're going to do some side bends. So we can do this in the chair as well. So hands just by your sides and then tilting your fingertips down towards your knees. So you can just do that down towards the side of the chair if you're seated doing this one. So just waking up that core a little bit. And then we're going to bring the feet a little bit further apart. We can do some hip circles. So hands on the hips, and we're just going to push the hips out and round. So big circles. If you're in your chair for this one, we're going to just take the knee out to the side, alternating. So keep those circles going or keep those knees coming out. Then I'm going to change direction. So going the other way. Okay, then we're going to bring the feet together, hands down onto the knees. We're going to do the same thing with the knees. So we're just going to bring the knees round in a circle. And we all look a little bit silly and probably feel a bit silly, but it's really good for your knees. If you're in a chair for that one, guys, we're going to do leg extensions. So we're going to bring the legs up. Okay, so just a few of those. Keep those knee circles going, then the other way. So just a couple more the other way. Then we're going to come down to the ankles. So if you need to just hold on to something for a bit of balance, bring the knee up to hip height and then just roll that foot around, getting some mobility through the ankles. And then the other way. Yeah, then the other side. So bringing up that knee and rolling the foot around. You can do this in your chair. And then the other way. And then we're just going to put feet on the floor and we're just going to come up onto the toes. So we're just going to lift the heels. You can still do this in your chair. And then we're going to go a little bit quicker. Good. And then we're going to go for some squats. So you can do this down to your chair if you want to. So we're going to put hands by the sides. And as we come down into a squat, we're going to take the hands up to shoulder height. Okay, so bringing the bum down, hands come up, a little bit of coordination. Ready for the next bit. Just a couple of those. You can be standing up and sitting down to your chair. Good stuff. Right, guys, I am going to now introduce you to a few of my friends. We're going to start with Tony Chestnut. Some of you might have heard of this song before. It's very cheesy, but very good fun. We're just going to do the first bit of it, which is a little bit slower. So we've got Tony Chestnut, which is toe, knee, chest, nut is your head. Okay, so it's Tony Chestnut. And then you've got nose, I love you. All right, so it's Tony Chestnut, nose, I love you. He's got some friends. We've got Eileen. So we point to our eye and we lean, nice little side bend. And then the other way. Then we've got Neil. For Neil, we're either going to lift our knee up if we're in a chair, or we're going to come down into a squat. So you're going to be kind of practicing all these people with me. Then we've got Pat. We're going to pat our shoulders. And then we're introduced to Bob. So it's a little bob up and down. Couple more, we've got rustle, so we're going to rustle our hands. Then we've got skip, so we can be skipping on the spot or lifting your knees up on your chair. This song is silly, but it's hip. Hands on your hips. Okay, so we start with Tony Chestnut. And we've got to keep up with the music. So I'm going to get the song going. It comes in quite quickly. So let me just get that one ready and going. Here we go. Right, everybody ready? Got to keep up, guys. And the chorus. That's what Tony knows. Try it again. Tony Chestnut. No, I'm getting it wrong. Tony Chestnut knows I love you. That's what Tony knows. Bit slower, I think. That's it. So holding down on your toes, up to your knees, down again. Here we go. Here comes his sister. So leaning over. Let me do the other side next time. So come down. It's kneel or knees up in your chair. Patting the shoulders. Pat. Coming up. So we've got Bob. Rustling your hands. Then we've got a bit of skipping. Jazz hands for silly. Gonna stop it there. There we go, guys. So that was your little bit of movement for today. So hopefully you feel a little bit warmer, a little bit more mobile.
That's fantastic, Jack. Thank you. I particularly liked Eileen, I have to say. And you can tell my age range, nearly went into Dexy's Midnight Runners. So anyway, thanks guys. That was brilliant. It's great to move a little bit. It always makes people smile. So I'm going to pass on, we are short of time, but I'm going to pass on to Claire Hunter, who is one of our senior health and wellbeing coaches, just to talk through some of the case studies and practical applications of some of the physical activity around Bridgewater that the team's been working on.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me correctly and everything. I'm not sure how I can follow Jack, to be honest. I think that was a bit too exciting. So I'm just going to share my screen with you. If you bear with me a moment. There he is. And the buttons underneath there. Lovely. So we're going to talk a little bit about social prescription as it's happening with my team in Bridgewater. And particularly, we're obviously really interested in looking at movement and looking at our theme of loneliness. So I'm going to start by introducing what we do. Our coaches work in the GP surgeries in the Bridgewater Bay PCN, and we work usually one-to-one with patients who have long-term health conditions. We work with a variety of people of all kinds of ages and all kinds of backgrounds. We're very broad in who we speak to. Many of those people will self-refer in, and some of those people are being referred directly from clinicians within the health service. Our primary goal is to help them to access physical activity, because we know that people with long-term conditions often don't understand how they can move appropriately for them, or they've been told maybe at one point that they should rest and therefore feel like it's dangerous for them to not rest. And there's all kinds of issues that come alongside that. So our job is really to help them work through those issues and then to signpost them on to suitable activities for them. And I'm just going to kind of go through some of the principles that we work with when we are engaging our patients. And everything is based around this idea of personalised care, which is something that you will probably hear come up in healthcare quite a lot. And it's the idea that the care plan belongs to the patient. So we think about things like what matters to the patient, what's important to them. It may not necessarily be what appears from a more objective level to be the most important thing. So we spend a lot of time talking to them and finding out what they're about, what they're able to do, what they used to do, what they would like to do, and what's stopping them. The discussion is always patient-led. It's entirely up to them what they want to talk to us about and how they would like to engage us. We're not going to push them into areas that they're not interested in. We know that's counterproductive. I sometimes say that my job is to listen to people talk themselves into change. And that's literally what we do, with a little bit of guidance, a little bit of a nudge and the focus along the way. All the decisions we make about what happens, where they go next, is shared between us and the patient and entirely led by the patient. So they get to make the choices rather than us saying to them, this is the thing you should do, and prescribing them a particular outcome. the aim is to help them develop knowledge, skills and confidence in order to self-manage their healthcare. A lot of the patients that we see are people that are visiting their doctors on a regular basis with issues that the doctors can't really deal with because they're not really medical issues. They're more kind of personal or social issues that, or just the sort of side of their medical care that they could self-manage. So we're helping them to move more towards self-management. We think a lot about trauma because we understand that many people coming to us have some kind of history of trauma. This is a general thing. We know about 1/3 of adults have had some kind of adverse childhood event, for instance. And we know that this can affect the way people engage with their healthy lifestyle. It can affect their ability to change or try new things. It can also affect their engagement. So, for instance, people who have a mental health or trauma in their background, they often feel like they need to be in control of what's happening to them. They don't necessarily trust outsiders to tell them what to do, which is exactly why this personalized model really works for them. And we think very much about using the evidence-based behavior change, looking at what actually works and what we know is going to work with the change psychology of the individuals that we are working with. So, as Jane said, and also my title slide said, we work on a model of social prescription. So social prescription is the idea of helping to find solutions and support for people that are out in the community. So we use assets in the community, which may well be groups, volunteers that are out there, existing classes and services. We also spend a lot of time looking at where the gaps are for that and trying to support those community assets from our team. We really want people to find things that they enjoy doing. We know that if they are going to be making a change that has an impact on their life, that has to be consistent. And in order to be consistent, it has to be something that they want to keep coming back to on a regular basis. So they have to enjoy it. And that's really important. And we look for activities that address multiple elements of well-being. So we look at things that are purposeful and things that, like I say, that they enjoy, and things where there is a social interaction where that is something that they are comfortable with and looking for. And we always look for a physical element of some kind, although we can be fairly broad in what we consider to be physical. For some people who have very limited mobility or limiting health conditions like COPD, what we would suggest in terms of exercise or movement, as we tend to look at it, may be quite different to what first comes to mind when you think about giving somebody a physical activity for their health. The aim is that we help them to help themselves. We support them into habits and lifestyle adjustments that they are going to be able to manage long term, and also with the aim of them supporting each other. So we look to groups where there are potentially peer mentors, people with lived experience who can help them along their pathway as well. And our biggest thing is that we look at the whole person. So when somebody comes in to see us, you could think within the first 5 minutes that you have a solution that fits their problem. But we're much more interested in looking at this person as a whole and saying what fits their life and how are we going to take that. Right. So I would have really loved to have some people to talk to you today, but as you can imagine, this is quite a sensitive area, and some of our patients are dealing with some fairly big issues that they're processing for themselves. So I'm going to take you through a couple of my patients. These are anonymized studies, yeah, why not? And I hope that I can do their voices justice by speaking for them. So the first case I wanted to look at is David's, and he would be a fairly classic case of a gentleman with a weight problem. He's in his 40s, he has type 2 diabetes, and he came to me looking to lose weight. So the immediate solution from a kind of a traditional model might be to say, okay, you need to eat less and move more. Easy. But this is something that wasn't working for him. So we went into it a little bit deeper, and on spending some time with him, I discovered that actually the root of his problem started a couple of years ago when his wife left him. And his life had revolved around his wife and daughter, and they left and they no longer speak to him. And he said, now I have nothing else to do but work and eat. So telling him to eat less, move more, isn't really going to help him. There are layers and layers of issues that we wanted to go through. I discovered that he was really into sport. He used to love playing rugby, but he got an injury. So social sport then immediately becomes something that we wanted to look at. But he also suffers from mental well-being issues, as you might imagine, from somebody who has been on his own and focusing solely on his work for so long. So we really needed to help him build up his confidence. What we've been doing with David is we've introduced him to our Active Lifestyles Healthy Weight group, which is a weight management group, but we also bring in physical activity, and it's kind of fun, diverse physical activity. We're not like throwing them through HIIT workouts or anything like that. Again, they're going for walks, they're doing archery, they're doing a little bit of wall climbing and things like that. And the hope with this is that he's able to then make some friends along the way. And this quote on the slide is a quote from his valuations, where he said, I don't really have any friends, and it's nice to have some positive comments and encouragement. This is really important when we think about looking at weight management, because weight management is uncomfortable. It requires sitting with the discomfort of being in a calorie deficit. And to do that, you have to have a reason. And if you don't think that you're worthwhile, and if you don't have a purpose for doing that, you can't sit with that discomfort. So part of the whole package for working with him is to give him some purpose and to give him the encouragement of having peers and other people around him. The second one, which I'm just going to go into very quickly, is Susan. She's an older lady, and when she came to me in clinic, she could barely walk. She's having a lot of issues with her back, and she was referred to me by the practice because what she really wanted, what she asked for when she walked through the door, was a GP referral group for rehab for the pain she was having in her back. Unfortunately, we don't have that service in the Bridgewater area at the moment. So I had a chat to her, and I learned a lot about her background. I discovered a year ago she was digging out a pond in her garden. She'd been very active and very capable and very strong. So we started talking about what had happened since. And I discovered that in the past year, she had had a major medical diagnosis that had been a bit of a shock. Her daughter had also had a major medical diagnosis that had been a bit of a shock. And her husband died very suddenly. And when her husband died, everything she had with him went with him. So also her hobby, which involved traveling around and meeting people and had all of her friends wrapped up in that as well, she wasn't able to access that because she didn't have him to support her in the driving and things like that. So what we see with Susan is an example of how her health went downhill very, very suddenly as a result of her losing her community and the social surroundings. And the quote that I had from her was that she was really glad that she could come and talk to us, because she felt that while she had family and she had people close to her to talk to, she didn't feel she could share her concerns with them because they were too close. So what I have done with Susan, I'm supporting her to access the Age UK Mature Movers groups and the classes that are available there. She didn't want to go for something majorly social to start with because she was worried that she would be going home to an empty house and that would be too hard. But we're taking some small steps, and by bringing her to a class where she can be active and she can move and she can build the core strength that her sore back needs, but she's also got the opportunity to meet some people and have a chat with people and start to build trust and maybe find those other people that she can talk to who she feels safe talking to. So I hope that's given you a very kind of quick whistle stop insight to how we can work and how we can bring the kind of community assets and the social side alongside the more clinical and just doing exercise and the more precise ways of supporting people in their health. But by doing that, we feel that we're able to provide people with a more well-rounded solution to their problems, and also to provide a sustainable way for people to keep supporting their own health.
That's brilliant, Claire. Thank you very, very much. And that's a real sort of, you know, from the macro that we started with Tom and Sport England, to a county initiative through Age UK and Milton Keynes, onto actually what that looks like for individuals through our social prescribers. Lot of, I can see Claire reading the chat, lot of interesting stuff around actually how we link up as social prescribers, which we're all trying to do desperately. I'm just going to hand, I know that we're a little over time, we will be finished in 5 minutes, so I'm just going to hand on to Sarah just to finish off the last piece around some local intervention.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry, my screen isn't sharing. Bear with me a second.
Always happens when we're on a pressure for time. It always happens.
Always the way. Sorry about this. So we're just going to quickly talk to you. Unfortunately, Leanne's had some technical issues. So we're just going to take you through some of our other programmes that we have, and some other local services. Still not picking up for some reason. Sorry, bear with me.
If we can't manage, Sarah, then we will wrap up and send it out a bit later.
Bear with, it should hopefully share now.
Yeah, there you go, it's sharing.
It's still okay. I'm really sorry, it's not sharing the right screens. There's just something going on with my computer right now, but we will send you some more details around our Love to Pedal scheme, which I hope lots of you have heard about already. So we've put together some lovely videos for people to be cycling virtually in their own homes, and we are providing the pedals to go with that, so we can send more information around for you, and the same with Walk Your Way. Again, we've put together a really lovely resource just detailing the local walks that are around the county that are accessible for everyone. So we've put together information around where the toilets are, where the benches are on particular walks, so people can have some breaks when they're out and about. And again, this information is on our website, but the shielded list that we've been working with the NHS with, we've also sent it out to a large amount of the people, I think around about 1,800 maybe, people that have responded to us from the shielding list saying that they were interested. So they have these actual hard copy booklets that they can go out and find these walks. We also have this virtually, so we've again recorded some walks that people can be doing in their homes, so it feels like they're actually out and about, so they can be doing their steps while sat down or walking around the house. We also have some funding available, which is part of tackling inequalities, and again we'll send this around, and also our workplace offer. So apologies about that, but we will send this information around for you.
So I had to wait to right to the end to let your ears prick up about the funding opportunities, but we will send those to all attendees, because we're really keen. SASP drives physical activity, we're passionate about it, but actually it needs everybody to embed some of that in their service, to get the outcomes that they want. And melding, as Phil said earlier, melding the physical and mental health is really key. So we're going to wrap up now. I just wanted to say thank you very, very much for attending, and sorry that we're a little bit over time. And really to conclude with, all people feel lonely. Everyone, including all of us on this call, will sometimes feel lonely, but for some people it is something that they feel often, and actually we hope that we can do something with that by melding the physical and mental together. And something that Caroline said, which really struck a chord with me, which was meeting people at their point of need. And I think Claire explained that incredibly well with some of that social prescribing. And I'd really like to keep that in mind as we go through and work back at base, back in our services, to actually start to think about meeting people at their point of need. How can we move physical activity into a place that is appropriate for them and is meaningful for them? So I'd like to thank all the speakers. It's been a slightly technical nightmare for us back here. I hope it's looked relatively smooth on the other side. So thank you very, very much. Please don't forget to sit less and move more as you go through your day. Thanks, guys.